Hello, everyone. Today I want to talk about writing again from the perspective of a ghostwriter. As some of you may know, I've been ghostwriting for a little while now and has really helped me to improve my craft even better than it was before. We're always on a path to improvement, aren't we? Now, for some people who might be interested in writing but don't know how to start, the good news is that writing is a relatively cheap hobby. So I'm here today to talk about some aids that can help you with your writing, analog as well as technological aids. So let's begin with the obvious. All you need to do in order to write is have some paper and some kind of writing implement. I'm not going to get too much into the weeds here, but if I'm going to get into a bit more detail on what you might find helpful, I usually like to write in something that makes writing more straightforward and comfortable. So I avoid spiral notebooks because the spiral in the middle of the notebook, when I lay it flat, open, can often get in the way of my handwriting. So I prefer to use notebooks that are bound in specific ways that don't require spirals. When it comes to outlining or pre-writing or world building, I often use notepads. So I'll buy a cheap notepad, a regular 8x11-inch notepad. Normal, is it A5 size? I'm not sure. And I will also buy a special kind of book that has plastic sheets in the middle. I'll put a picture up here. And this kind of book will hold the pages of the notebook. As I fill the pages in with various characters or various information, I can slot them into the plastic sleeves, and it can actually hold all of my world building notes and information quite easily. So, paper and a writing implement. Now, a lot of people recommend something simple that you can erase, like a pencil, right? A pencil and eraser. And of course, you can definitely go for that. If you do, you want to really get a nice soft pencil that will leave a nice dark mark on the page without smudging. So get your standard HB or even a 2B. I don't like fine pencils, and the reason why is that when you're trying to reread your work later, you're going to really struggle with reading what you wrote if the lettering is too fine. And pencil does fade, so I often don't write in pencil, I write in pen. And that has its own other set of issues, of course, because pens tend to run out or whatever. So I am now also at a stage where as I'm writing, I can get bothered by something, or I don't want to scratch it out or whatever when I make a mistake. It's just this tiny little thing I have. So I have recently really gotten into erasable pens, which is, I don't want to say it's a Japanese product, but I bought mine from a Japanese seller. And these erasable pens have little cartridges that you can refill the pen with very easily, very simply. And so I bought 2 or 3 pens, and then I just buy different colored cartridges and swap them out and go from there. So much for the basics. Now let's get to another level of the basics, which is the more technological side, but you could also use some of these in analog. Let me explain. So when you are writing on your computer, you're going to want to use writing software. Now, a lot of people will have something like Microsoft 365 or Microsoft Office Suite. There are Apple equivalents that you can use, but if you're super cheap and you're broke, you can always try out LibreOffice as a very free open source solution for writing. And that is what I use. You might want to use Google Docs. Google Docs is another way to write because, and it's quite competitive with LibreOffice for me, because you might want to switch to a different device, or because you're traveling, you might want to write on your tablet. So generally speaking, I'm going to be writing on Google Docs, or I'll shift things over from my LibreOffice into my Google Drive, and that is a way for me to switch between devices if I want to. I also like Google Docs because they have They have a way to put headers in, and these headers allow you to move between the chapters quite simply by clicking on the headers on the left side of the pane, and that just makes it so much easier for navigation as opposed to scrolling up and down when you're using LibreOffice. I'm sure there are probably ways to get around it in LibreOffice, but this is just me. Besides the writing, medium, whether it's a pad or a digital notepad or WordPad or whatever you want to use, besides those, you will also want to own a thesaurus and a dictionary, or you'll want to have bookmarked some popular dictionaries and thesauruses. So Urban Dictionary is very helpful. Of course, Merriam-Webster is very helpful. And you're going to want to have thesaurus.com as well on the side. All of these things can really help you improve with your word choice and figure out the connotations or meaning of various words that you want to use. Now, when it comes to checking your work, once again, for digital solutions, you're going to be able to access spell check and grammar checking. So one way, for example, you can do this is using very basic spell check that might come with your browser or that is available in Google Docs. Some writing applications like Microsoft 365 might offer spell checks as well. As per usual, you need to be very careful when using it. Do not select correct all. Go through each one and double check, because sometimes the corrections are not correct. So you need to just double check that. Another solution that you can use, whether you're on Google or whether you're using some other kind of software or you're writing in an email or something like that, is Grammarly. So Grammarly is a very popular option for many writers in order to check both their spelling and their grammar and their voice. And this is where things get a bit tricky. So while I like Grammarly and I find it very useful for getting simple errors, it can be a bit of a pitfall for newbie writers who lack confidence to stand on what they have written. So let me explain. Whether or not you get the Pro version, which I don't have, you really should have the free version. Okay, you really can have the free version running, and that's all you need. The free version will highlight your spelling errors for the most part, and those will be marked in red. And you can definitely click on each and consider it. Now, of course, if you're writing a fantasy or sci-fi and you're using very special words that you've created for yourself, you're going to want to add them to your dictionary or find ways to make sure that Grammarly doesn't check it for you or like change it for you, right? So you want to be careful even with the red underlines, but you can go with red and it will generally save you a lot of hassle checking your grammar and your spelling in general. Blue, sometimes when I see a line underlined in blue, I will accept Grammarly's suggestions. Usually blue is more looking at repetition or unnecessary added words that are just fluff. So sometimes I will accept blue recommended changes, but not all the time. And finally, there's yellow. Yellow is something you only access with the Pro version. I don't recommend going for yellow. I think if you are a business person and you're trying to write an email and you want to sound very professional and formal, I believe Grammarly's yellow recommendations can help you out quite a bit. However, if you're a writer, I really don't recommend relying on a program to help you write entire sentences. So stay away from the yellow recommendations in general, especially if you're going into fiction. I would not recommend it. Now, when it comes to writing, whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction, you might be thinking, okay, I have this, document software, LibreOffice or Microsoft 365 or what have you. But I want to publish. I want to self-publish. So how am I going to do that? Like, how can I prepare my document so that it will work well in Kindle and all of that? So let's talk about some very, I don't want to say it's a reality check, but preparing your stuff for Kindle can be a bit of a hassle. And if you want to get into other more, I don't want to say niche, but no one can really compete with Kindle, can they? But there is Kobo, there are other services that are available. For example, there's Ingram Spark, there's Lulu, there's Smashwords, there's Readsy. There are a whole bunch of different approaches to getting your stuff online. However, some of these services, whether it's Google Play Books or Smashwords, will require very, very specific formatting. And Amazon also, in order to create a really nice looking product, you're going to need really good formatting. You can't just slop words on a page and then push it out. I highly recommend that you take the time to understand what your book should look like. And this is where getting help to edit and format your book is incredibly crucial. Now, of course, you can go to online services. There are online self-publishing, ghostwriting, writer support services like Readsy, for example, that will provide you services helping you to edit and format your book appropriate to the platform that you have chosen. However, there are programs out there that will help you prepare your whole novel or nonfiction book for self-publishing. And it will make it into a Mobi for you or an EPUB for you. And these writing software can be quite helpful and quite robust in what they offer. Of course, for Apple, we have Vellum. Now, I don't use Vellum, so I'm not going to talk much about it, but I heard that it is basically the industry gold standard, or, as close enough as you can get to that. Scrivener is going to be Vellum's Windows competitor, and Scrivener also is a very robust software that you can use. It's basically an app, both online and offline, and it will allow you to create scenes and create character profiles. There's a huge amount of support for writers within that software that basically can help you world build and understand your whole story kind of outline and the pacing and everything. And as a result, you can actually plan each chapter and each scene in each chapter. And then there's a whole space to write in there, just like a piece of writing software. And once everything is done, you can tweak the theme, you can tweak headings and all of that, and you can tweak the page breaks and just make everything very unique to you. And it will crunch it down into the format that you're looking for. So Scrivener, I highly recommend. It is affordable. I think they just came out with a new version. I have used Scrivener in the past, but not permanently. I'm currently using Atticus. Atticus is another option. It's not as robust as Scrivener. It has an online component. They just got a whole bunch of new fonts that you can apply to it. So I'm personally using Atticus. This is not a product placement or any kind of recommendation to use Atticus. I might switch to Scrivener at some point in the future, but for now I'm using Atticus. Atticus is also online. There's a portion of it that can go offline. Don't ask me why I chose Atticus. I wasn't sure if I needed everything in Scrivener, and I felt like Scrivener just had a lot. There was just a lot going on, whereas Atticus felt a bit more clean to me. But once again, it's all up to you and what you need. So consider these options. Another option that I've looked at and I've worked in is Dibbly Create. Dibbly Create has AI support as well. So if you need any help with outlining or things, you can use the AI called Kip in Dibbly Create, and Kip will help you. I'm not a fan of using AI to create outlines. Frankly, if you need help creating an outline, It doesn't mean that you're terrible. It just means that maybe you haven't thought about your idea enough. So I highly recommend working with somebody, a professional who understands what's going to work and what's not going to work instead of relying on AI. AI can tell you a lot, but it might not be exactly what you need for your specific circumstance. So, those are the writing software that you can use, not just to write your book, but also to plan your book and to spit out some kind of formatting. The good news is that for some of these programs, if they are online compatible and run from a browser, Grammarly will also show up in those particular writing software. So Atticus, for example, has some support for Grammarly, so you can use Grammarly in conjunction with Atticus. Now, I just mentioned AI, and this is indeed a very hot topic right now. We have a lot of game devs, music people, artists, writers freaking out because AI has come to take away their jobs. And it is indeed very scary. The interesting thing I do want to note is that technically AI has been around for a long, long time. Anyone who has gone to a name generator website was in fact using a form of AI. And these name generators, the ReadZ generators that you can access, all of these kinds of generators I have found to be incredibly useful. When it comes to generating names for places or characters, a name generator can be a great springboard for you and can diversify your word bank for names, and even sometimes seeing a name will prompt you to think about what kind of person would go with that name, and that person might be the next main character of your book, right? So some people can find inspiration anywhere, and name generators are a great place to start. However, I do find that anyone who indiscriminately uses a name generator will end up in some kind of trouble because name generators can often just spew out nonsense. So you got to be very, very careful. Remember that if you are intending to establish a serious brand based around a series or something like that, you're going to have to be very careful about the names that you want to generate for that IP. So think about that. ChatGPT, therefore, I believe, is simply an extension of what these name generators can do. And so there's nothing wrong with going to ChatGPT for some help if you aren't sure about a detail, or if you want to just generate some ideas or some lists or some names. I'm not averse to thoughtfully using AI in order to basically generate inspiration or get you thinking about something. One thing that I often will do is go to language dictionaries. And let's say I want to name a mountain range. And since the feeling of the book is more Viking-esque or Norse, I will want to use an Old Norse dictionary in order to name, let's say, the mountain range. But let's say I'm just running short on time. I want to be efficient about this. I can go to ChatGPT and I can ask ChatGPT to list 30 Old Norse names related to colors, or 30 Old Norse words related to animals. And it will compile that information that you would find from a dictionary, and it will just make that whole process a bit more efficient. And from those names, I will appropriate some language to give the mountain range pizzazz, make it more interesting. So yeah, you can use ChatGPT in a very smart way, but I highly recommend not to fall into the trap of relying on ChatGPT to write you an outline or to formulate a character. If you're really struggling that hard with formulating a specific character, there are many other things you can do before going to ChatGPT. In terms of the creative process of pre-writing and world building, there are quite a few aids that you can rely on in order to flesh out your world. Let's take a look at a few of them. So if you are going to make a world, let's say you want to build a full system, you want to include politics, you want to include characters and countries and magic systems and economies and everything, what are you going to do? Well, like I said, I often will do it all by hand, and I will make a little special notebook based off of it with sleeves that I can move things around and I can add more in between and all of that kind of stuff. That's one way to go about it. And if you are particularly inspired when you are using your hands within an analog environment, I highly recommend going this route. However, if you really, really love typing and you just want to use something digital, it's very, very straightforward to rely on certain document types, a combination of spreadsheets and documents linked together in your Google Drive. You can go about it that way. You can often organize using Google Drive with the headers. You can organize your notes about the world, and you can usually be able to organize things in a way that you can navigate using the left navigation pane very, very easily. However, there are some online solutions like World Anvil or Campfire that allow you to create what is equivalent to a private wiki. And I have heard that D&D campaign game masters, dungeon masters, whatever they're called, they will often use some of these online solutions in order to flesh out the world in even more detail. Now, these kinds of solutions can become a drain. Many of them will cost something for a pro version, of course, and oftentimes I think world building can become a bit of a black hole for would-be writers. So you got to be careful about this. And of course, some of the writing software that I had mentioned earlier, like Scrivener and another one I had put on screen but hadn't mentioned, Obsidian, have all of this built in so that you can actually just rely on their detailed note support and widgets to flesh out what you're trying to cover. Other people online have noted that OneNote is something else that is kind of very useful because it's easily divided and color-coded and things like that. So World Anvil is one, Campfire is another one, TiddlyWiki is another popular one, Zim is another one, Org Mode could be used to build a world up. All of these kinds of things can help with creating a very vibrant world. And same thing goes with timelines. So if you're trying to work on a timeline, spreadsheets are one way to go. I use spreadsheets in order to establish what's happening in each chapter. But if you want to build an actual horizontal line timeline, that's a bit more difficult. Some people said that they would rely on certain things like Obsidian or Scrivener or even World Anvil, I believe, have some timeline functionality. And when I want to do a timeline, I'm more likely to just draw it out on a piece of paper and have various pages with various different kinds of timelines. So it's really up to you and what you want to do. For maps, there is a lot online. And I think map making has become more popular because a lot of D&D groups want to just get more into the world and really explore what they are. Well, they want to explore what they're exploring, right? They want to visualize what they're exploring more easily. So things like Incarnate or Wondercraft, RPG Map Editor 2, all of these kinds of things have become incredibly helpful for people to build maps. I personally use Incarnate. Incarnate is my go-to, and I find using that to be incredibly intuitive, and the filters all look really nice. So that's one way to go. On the other hand, once again, There's something therapeutic about art. So if you want to sit down and hand draw your maps, just like Jared Tolkien did, Godspeed. Because honestly, sometimes that additional personal touch is what readers are looking for these days. In a world where everyone looks the same, it can be very easy to just rely on these quick, efficient systems that help you build something, but then it takes away from that very personal touch that your book could have. So something to consider. When it comes to publishing, I'm not going to really get into all of the platforms because, number one, if you are really interested in publishing, only you as a writer can really understand what platform will suit your needs. Yes. However, I will make a little bit of some generalization, shall we say. Okay. So for unpaid publishing, so you just want to get your work out there. You want people to read stuff. Of course, there's Wattpad. There's places like Tumblr, fan fiction sites, original fiction sites. You just need to type it in and you should be good to go. You got to be careful though. There are some apps I've noticed where people are publishing and supposedly getting money. It makes me wonder though how much the platform provider is skimming off the top. So just be careful about that. You also want to make sure that your work is being protected. Okay. First, you want to make sure it's being protected from the platform that you're publishing on. Yeah. And then you also want to make sure that the platform is providing protection for your work so that people can't just copy and paste easily. Now, once again, some authors prefer to allow readers to truly own what they bought, and I'm in support of this for sure. But you need to do it very wisely. So consider that before you start publishing. There are some very popular sites to write on. So Wattpad is one of them. WordPress is another one. Inkit is another one. However, if anyone does any kind of scrolling in any of these websites, they're going to realize that it's largely dominated by women, young women, and by interests that range from, well, romance to romance. Not much of a range. The truth is that money is to be found in the romance industry. However, it is incredibly competitive. And so when you are publishing on some of these platforms, you have to understand that if you are writing some kind of nitty-gritty fantasy, the likelihood of people clicking on it is going to be quite low. And this can make you feel pretty bummed out. There are specific niche platform websites like lit RPG platforms that allow people who are into like lit RPG to write specifically for people who are there to search for lit RPG. In the same way that digital manhwa or manga is flourishing on certain apps and certain websites, this is a situation where these sites are specifically targeting a very specific demographic, and if you're part of that demographic, it's a great way to go because you know that people are going to be wanting to click on your stuff because that's what they're there for. However, if you get into something like Wattpad, the chances of you making it really big are small, but if you do make it big on Wattpad, you have a chance to get published more traditionally. You can make networks, make contacts, and you can really soar if you somehow do really, really well on Wattpad. But once again, the chances for that are pretty low. There are a lot of very traditional self-publishing approaches. Let's say you want to make a book and you want to put that book in your family's hands and they can look at the front page and they can see your name on it and it just looks like a high quality product. So stuff like Lulu can help you out there. It's more bespoke. Some self-published authors on Amazon will use Lulu for specific editions or things like that so that their fan base can have that special book that they can enjoy. And so, of course, one of the other digital platforms that a lot of writers will be targeting is something like Ingram Spark or things like Kobo, Smashwords. So Smashwords is a very helpful site. Your formatting does need to be on fleek in order to do really well on Smashwords. But Smashwords is great because it spits out, or I should say, provides for a variety of devices. And it's just a really, like, if you're going to be self-publishing, why not put it on Smashwords as well? Why not, right? So there's Smashwords, and then there's Amazon. Amazon Kindle is probably the place where everyone is going to go. Let's all be real here. And if you choose or allow your book to be on Kindle Unlimited, you still get a little bit of money for reading. So if people read a certain amount of pages on your Kindle book, even if they have it in Kindle Unlimited, you will still get a cut of it. And honestly, why not? It's just a great way to build up your fan base. Using and relying on Kindle Unlimited can be a great way for you to at least start to build up your fan base. So use Kindle. It's honestly one of the better sites to use. Is it always easy to use? Is it always intuitive? No. There are things that you have to do that you will need to sit down and do some serious research for. And hopefully in the future, I will be able to share some of my experiences writing or working with Amazon. And I will hopefully be able to give some tips on how to self-publish on there, or at least point out really good YouTubers who have great tutorials on how to use KDP. So yeah, writing doesn't have to be difficult. It's about as difficult as you want to make it in terms of your tools and what you're relying on. There are some people out there, right, who think, oh, I can't do this hobby because it's so expensive. Well, it doesn't have to be. You could just start tomorrow, right? And if you're really serious about getting into writing, you don't really need a lot in order to write. But the truth is, if you do want to get self-published, you are going to have to probably shell out for some kind of program that will help you export into a really nice, clean copy for Kindle and Amazon Marketplace. And furthermore, it's probably a good idea to shell out for one really nice, robust digital writing software, something like Scrivener or Vellum, something like that, something like Atticus or Obsidian. And the reason why I recommend something like that is because these pieces of software are able to help you stay focused and watch your word count and keep on target and things like that. So it's just a very helpful space for you to be writing in if you're going to be writing digitally. At the same time, having said all of that, there is something about taking your notebook, taking your notepad and sitting outside and writing with, your erasable pen and paper. And honestly, I remember one time sitting in a cafe in Thailand. I was visiting in Thailand for whatever reason, and I was just writing and writing and writing, and I just felt so inspired in that zone, and it felt really good to be able to literally sit down and write anywhere. Now, sitting down and writing anywhere, it sounds kind of crazy, but I'm here to tell you that I think it was the 50 Shades of Grey author who said she wrote most of it on her BlackBerry. I don't know. Well, 50 Shades of Grey isn't that great, is it? But the point still stands. Writing doesn't have to be something that's locked away by money. You could technically write everything on your Samsung phone if you wanted to, or your Apple or whatever. So it's really up to you where and how you want to start writing. But if you do want to take publishing seriously, if you want to get into writing books that are series, and you want to have themes and things that tie those books together in terms of formatting, if you want to have nice book covers, all of that, you are going to need to shell out a little bit. Now, I'm going to end here for now. But there is a lot I could talk about beyond that. I could talk about, let's say, how you go about making your book cover. But I would like to end on a positive note and encourage everyone to just choose what is right for them and do your research before getting into something. There have been times in my life where I've gotten sucked into thinking, oh, I need this in order to be a better programmer, or I need this in order to be a better writer. And the truth is, you don't really. But you might need some writing software at some point, like I said. Anyway, I'm going to end here. Thank you for listening. For everyone who didn't know, I had my first live stream. It was very exciting. There were some people in chat, and we had some great time talking together. We were unpacking some of the ideas in On Fairy Stories by J.R.R. Tolkien. We did not finish the essay, so there will be another live stream where we're going to be talking about On Fairy Stories some more. We're going to talk about Tolkien's ideas on fairy stories some more. And we will also probably get derailed and end up reacting to stuff. And we'll probably end up talking about video games and music and all those other fun things. So that is hopefully going to happen on Sunday night. I'm not sure. I'm traveling this weekend through next week and then through the week after. So things might be a little spotty, but I'm going to do my best to keep in contact with everyone. There will be an announcement about Discord, perhaps in the video description, and you can join our Discord if you would like to chat about books and games and writing. So come around by, say hello, and I look forward to meeting you. Take care.